Momentum is building. Now let's see what the charts actually confirm. This is Bitcoin on Point, where I give you the only news that matters, the cleanest technical analysis to trade the best asset in the world, Bitcoin. And right now, Bitcoin is sitting on a major trend line that it's been respecting ever since 2023. This isn't the first point of contact. This isn't the second point of contact. This is now the third point of contact on this respected trend line. And every time in the past, since the trend line was created, Bitcoin has gone on to push a new all-time high whenever it's come back to this trend line. Is this time going to be any different? So the higher time frames are flashing constructive signals, whilst the lower time frames are showing evident pullbacks into key areas of support. So the real question isn't what Twitter thinks, it's whether this is distribution or another high time frame reset before continuation. Now, before we go deeper into the charts, let's zoom out, because the macro backdrop continues to shift in a very specific direction. Massive. Ethereum is being considered as a potential blockchain to launch the Euro stablecoin. This isn't experimentation. This is Europe evaluating settlement infrastructure. Public blockchains are entering sovereign finance. So public blockchains aren't on the sidelines anymore. They're actually being assessed for sovereign finance use cases. This is to me, a structural signal. It's alignment. It's not necessarily a narrative. Now, clear regulation is actually finally taking shape. Crypto and AI czar David Sachs calls CFTC chair Michael Selig and SEC chair Paul Atkins a dream team, set to deliver clear regulatory guidelines for digital assets. And it's funny because markets don't fear regulation, they actually fear uncertainty. So this clarity is what unlocks capital, it unlocks scale, and also long-term participation. Now, Bitcoin's exposure is going mainstream. Just in Bitcoin Treasury Company Strategy, MSTR, daily trading volume is now higher than the banking giant JP Morgan. Just let that sink in for a second. This isn't a meme stat. This is a traditional equity market showing more activity in Bitcoin-aligned exposure than legacy banking giants. We need to keep this in mind as we talk about long-term structure. Now let's go back to the charts. On the monthly time frame, the higher time frames, Bitcoin is respecting a trend line that has defined this entire cycle. In fact, this isn't the first, this isn't the second, this is the third time since 2023 that Bitcoin has come back and is respecting the same trend line that led to new euphoric rallies and all-time highs after every previous point of contact. So what this shows is repeated clean tests without a breakdown, which tends to reinforce the trend, not weaken it as per se. So as long as this structure holds, the long-term bias remains constructive. Now, on the weekly chart, we do get another important signal. Now, this is definitely not one to miss or to ignore, because despite price pulling back over the last few months, Bitcoin is seeing bullish divergence on momentum, where we have higher lows forming in the Bitcoin price and lower lows forming in the RSI indicator. So what this tells us is selling pressure is diminishing as price approaches a major higher time frame level. This is exactly where reversals and continuations tend to form, and it's definitely not a signal, I repeat, to ignore. Now on the daily time frame chart, we're starting to zoom in a little bit more now. Price is breaking down short-term structure and actually rotating lower. So what we had was this level of support on this trend line for Bitcoin on the daily. We lost that support, confirmed it as resistance, and have now run up into the previous trend line, met it as resistance when it was once support, and we've seen rejection. So with this being said, it looks like Bitcoin wants to sweep back down into the liquidity pocket and key demand that's been holding on the daily time frame, which sits roughly at $84,000 to $85,000. So the context actually matters, because this move is bringing Bitcoin back down into daily support, not through it. So far, this looks like a controlled retracement, not an impulsive breakdown. Bitcoin's been in a range between a supply level at $95,000 and a key level of support below at $84,000 to $85,000. So at this moment in time, this is chop between support and resistance. And right now, Bitcoin is trying to find its footing before going for the next macro leg higher, which could push us back into the supply at $95,000. And this is normal behavior during consolidation phases. The market is testing whether buyers are still willing to defend this level. So far, structure remains intact. Now on the 4-hour time frame for Bitcoin, we have a bit more of an intricate picture. You can see we have imminent support at $86,800, which is the wick from the 19th of December, which could potentially get filled as Bitcoin pulls back down. But essentially, we have the key demand from the previous lows on the 1st of December, where we saw a massive rally back into that supply at $95,000. We then also saw another sharp recovery back down into the demand on the 4-hour time frame before pushing to a lower high. So at this moment in time, Bitcoin does have this lower high underneath supply and could potentially roll back into the imminent demand, where we could likely see another bounce back up to the previous highs from the 12th of December, which are imminent resistance before testing the $95,000 supply. And the 2-hour time frame gives us a very similar picture, much more clear. You can evidently see that we have this level of support below, a massive order block at $85,000. And if Bitcoin does continue to roll over from this high of resistance, where we've come back off of demand, then simply look for a retest back down into this area for a key level of support before attacking supply above at $90,000. So when the daily, the 4-hour, and the 2-hour time frame all align, these initial zones become decision points, not panic points. Key structure continues to hold the further we zoom in or out. So when we stack everything together, macro, sovereign finance is evaluating Ethereum, regulatory clarity is forming, and Bitcoin exposure is surging. The monthly time frame has seen a third major point of contact on a very distinct trend line. The weekly is forming a huge bullish divergence on the RSI. The daily is pulling back into a key support zone. And the 4-hour and the 2-hour have synchronized retracement with structure still intact. This is not disorder, this is compression at high importance levels. So now let's check on Ethereum. And on the daily time frame, ETH has this ascending trend line that it's also been respecting. Right this second, it does hang on a knife edge. We do initially need to see daily closes above this ascending support line, or what we could potentially see is a rollover back down to the Morningstar candle formation that we covered in yesterday's video, where ETH could find a macro level of support and once again start the relief rally back up to supply, which roughly sits on the highs from the 15th of December at $3,100. So ETH is at a critical point. It needs to hold this green ascending trend line or come back into demand to create a larger spring before going for a run into the supply area. And on the 4-hour time frame, it's pretty clear at the moment that this is necessarily the case, because what we had was a structural breakdown on ETH in the past on the lower time frames, which initially saw a breakout on the, on the 19th of December. Now, after that breakout, we did hover around a key level of support. We ran up and placed a lower high though, and now have started resorting back down into the key demand interest area. So what's likely in this scenario is ETH to come back, and potentially build some sort of double bottom or higher low in this demand, which roughly sits between $2,900 to $2,800, look to build a base and then push on higher. The major thing to focus on here was Ethereum's breakout on this lower time frame, which could be signaling the shift for bullish momentum on the macro, i.e. the daily, and pushing back up to $3,100. So ETH is holding structure whilst Bitcoin consolidates at support, and the idea of this move is corrective, not terminal. And this is one of those moments where discipline matters. Bitcoin is sitting at long-term trend support. We have a massive weekly hidden bullish divergence. Multi-time frames, we're getting sort of pullbacks all over the graph, but there is a structural base build between a range with no conformational breakdown. Now, on top of this, macro is improving on clarity. This isn't a moment for certainty. This isn't a moment for certainty. This is a moment to watch the reaction, respect the levels that Bitcoin is currently holding, and let the market confirm the next move. Now, if you want to support the channel, the links below are there for you. You can trade on the platform we use and get fee discounts and bonuses. It's completely optional, but it really helps the channel grow. So thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next update.